Welcome in, everyone, to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Wednesday, November 27th around here, and we have a great show for you today. We got to get through a lot of games today, but we are going to start talking a little bit about those CFP rankings that we had that came out yesterday. Definitely some different reactions to it, including this system is absolutely broken. The format definitely does need to be changed, and I'm sure it will be in the offseason. Then we'll get into a couple of big game breakdowns. We have Texas A&M. We have South Carolina, Clemson. Want to make sure I break down those guys for you first. Then we'll get into a couple of upset alerts, CFP hope battles, depending on the way you look at it. Notre Dame, USC, Miami, Syracuse, as well as Kansas State, Iowa State. A couple of huge games that could totally shake up the CFP race. Then we'll get into a couple of rivalries of the week. We'll get into clean old-fashioned hate happening in Athens. We'll get to the Iron Bowl. We'll get to the game. A lot of big-time games that we just got to dive into a little bit more. A lot of hate going around this weekend. And then we'll get to a little bit of a whip around of just all the other games. We'll get to Memphis, Tulane. We'll get to Oregon State, Boise State, Colorado's game against Oklahoma State. A lot of games that we have to get to today with the abbreviated week. We'll try to get in all the stuff that you guys need to know as we get into rivalry weekend. But before we jump in, I do want to remind you all we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show, and the best way for you all to get your question on the screen, we can have fun back and forth here, is to use the super chat. At the bottom of the chat on the Sports Network page, you can click that $sign, add any question, comment you'd like. It'll pop up on the screen and we can have fun back and forth here. Definitely want this to be as interactive as possible, especially as we get into the craziness that is the CFP race. Definitely want you guys to be able to ask all the questions you want, so utilize that super chat, or also GSMCpodcast.net does the exact same thing, so utilize either of those if you would like. But let's jump into this, because we have a CFP rankings that have been released yesterday and a lot of things that I want to break down for you guys here. And I think with a lot of this stuff, it's very easy to kind of overreact. It's very easy to get a little bit crazy. Some of this stuff is going to change. I feel very confident that a lot of this stuff is going to change before we get to the final iteration of this thing. But let's get into the rankings first, and we'll start with the 25 to 13 here. And I think the biggest thing, at least from the bottom, is UNLV. I think they're in a position right now that is really, really advantageous. You have Army that has fallen out of the top 25 this week, and you're in a position where maybe if you went out, you would get the nod over a Boise State, and maybe even if Army beats Tulane, you would get the nod over an Army team that would be 12-1, you would be 11-2, but you would have that quality win over Boise State that Army doesn't necessarily have. Obviously, Tulane would be a quality win, but that would be an interesting thing to watch. Not having Army in these rankings at all leaves that door open for possibly UNLV to get that bid by themselves, as opposed to Boise State or Tulane or Army, that it felt like it was going to be one of those three even a couple of weeks ago. But Colorado does hang around in the top 25 this week. I think it gives them at least a slight opening to possibly be that Big 12 champion that gets into the mix. But we do got to talk about something here in a second, and actually let's just talk about it now. Tulane, they're at 17 right now, and they're sitting above Iowa State. They're sitting above at least 4 of the 5 teams in the Big 12 that are in the top 25 right now. If they were to win out, if Arizona State doesn't win the Big 12, let's say Iowa State doesn't win the Big 12 to just make it a little bit cleaner, if they don't win out, or if Tulane were to win out, would they jump that Big 12 champion? Could it be Tulane and Boise State in there instead of Boise State and Arizona State, or Tulane and Arizona State? Could it possibly be just no Big 12 champion in the mix? I do think that could be a reality if you avoid those top 3 teams, Arizona State, Iowa State, and BYU. If Kansas State, Colorado, or really anyone else wins it, I think that door is open. I think if anyone beyond Colorado wins it, I feel very confident that it would be Tulane above those teams, and I really wouldn't have too big of an argument about it. I think if it's anyone in the top 25, they probably would jump over Tulane, but as it sits right now, they're sitting pretty far behind them, and it would be interesting to see if Tulane can get in and the Big 12 could just be left out, which would be absolutely wild, but it's definitely on the table with only a couple of weeks left. You also have Missouri there. They are the committee's darling, it seems, and definitely helping out some SEC teams up top. You also have Illinois hanging around in the top 25 doing the exact same thing for Penn State and a couple other teams, so it's kind of just the game that we're playing right now. There's going to be a couple of teams in here that aren't necessarily CFP bound or have the shot for the CFP, but definitely deserve a little bit of a spot in the top 25. A&M at 20 all but confirms that they have to win the SEC, and that's the only path for them to get into the playoff. I do believe pretty much everyone has come around to that side of thinking, and I would be surprised if really anything else was the case. And then obviously the Big 12 teams are in the exact same boat: BYU, Iowa State, Arizona State. So going to be really interesting to see how all that breaks down, and that Tulane team just continues to play well. If they win out the rest of the way, there's a real world where the Big 12 just gets entirely left out, even with a Colorado or a Kansas State winning this thing. So would be absolutely crazy. But this, to me, I want to get to South Carolina here for a second. I think this buries South Carolina. I'd love to say that it doesn't, but they do play Clemson this upcoming weekend. I think even a win over Clemson, I think it would help out Ole Miss and Alabama more than it would help out South Carolina. I'd be a little bit surprised if they were to jump Alabama and Ole Miss if they were to beat Clemson. Maybe they'll do that. Maybe they'll give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt if they're able to get the win this weekend, but it feels more and more like South Carolina's path to the playoff is very, very slim. It looks like they're respecting that head-to-head that they have against Ole Miss and Alabama above really all else, so it could be a win this weekend for South Carolina. Actually helps Alabama more than it helps South Carolina, so would be a little bit of an interesting diatribe there. Maybe South Carolina would jump those two teams and find their way into the field if they beat Clemson, but definitely puts you in a tough spot. Being behind Alabama, being behind Ole Miss, puts you in a really tough spot to find your way in there as an at-large bid. So Alabama is still in it. They need one team to fall as far as I'm concerned. They do need Clemson as well to lose probably, but a Notre Dame, a Penn State, even Tennessee, if they were to lose, I do think Alabama would be that next team in there. Granted, if Clemson were to lose to South Carolina. So they're still in it. Ole Miss in a tougher spot. A lot of insane things would have to happen for Ole Miss to get in, but as we saw last week, that's not necessarily off the table by any means. So obviously it will be really interesting to watch this unfold. And then you do have the top 12, and you have Clemson sitting right there. They're in the Tennessee seat that was there last week. We'll see if they can get in the way Tennessee did this past weekend, and then we'll see if they have an at-large bid on the table. I do think they do. They'll probably need a little bit of help somewhere, but definitely an opening for Clemson to win the game this weekend, even if they don't go to the ACC championship, get a possible at-large bid, and sit there with 3 ACC teams in this thing at the end of the day. Then you do have Boise State sitting steady at 11. Feels like they're kind of comfortably there. The Big 12 is closing the gap for that possible bye. If Arizona State were to win out, I think they might be able to jump them, but definitely will be interesting to watch how much they jump if they win this weekend or something like that. So definitely will be interesting to see how all that unfolds. Indiana falls to 10, but a win on Saturday puts them in. I think it's pretty firmly, they're comfortably in the field at this point. SMU likely in the same boat, but 10-2 Clemson and 11-2 SMU could be an interesting hypothetical. Let's say SMU were to win this weekend but lose to Miami in the conference championship, and they're up against a 10-2 Clemson. Would be an interesting conversation, no doubt about that. I probably would lean SMU because I don't love punishing people for playing in their championship, but definitely would be a fun one, and I think these two teams not having played each other in the regular season opens that door just a little bit. Georgia and Tennessee are in the win-and-in scenarios right about now. Can't think that they're going to really fall off by any means. Georgia obviously has to be careful. If they lose to Georgia Tech this weekend and then lose in the SEC championship, I think they could get left out. Probably a pretty far-fetched, but we'll see what happens. And then we will see if that Georgia Tech game, this upcoming weekend for Georgia, is measured against Miami. Maybe they jump Miami after this weekend if they're able to get that win. We'll see what happens there. But Miami, we'll talk about them here for a second. They continue to be the more overranked teams in this thing. I really like Miami. I think they're capable of a lot of things. I probably would have put them right around 10 and slotted everyone up one more position. That being said, understand that a lot of people think they are the best team in the ACC, and we'll see what happens there. Notre Dame is sitting very pretty. I think a loss would still kill them if I had to imagine, with Alabama and Clemson and a lot of those teams sitting right outside. But maybe there's a little bit of an opening to lose the game this weekend, and maybe that's enough. The top 4 is unchanged and likely should be that way. I don't think you could argue that Penn State should be above Texas. I think that's a fair argument to be made, but at the end of the day, the top 4 is relatively unchanged, and I think that makes sense for most people out there. But let's get to the bracket, because that's what everyone wants to see right about now. The people that have buys are the exact same as last week. It is Oregon from the Big Ten, Texas from the SEC, Miami from the ACC, and Boise State from the Mountain West. And then you do have your Big 12 champion at the 12 spot in Arizona State. So kind of break it down real quickly, you do have an SEC matchup in the first round with Georgia and Tennessee. Would be the exact same matchup in the exact same place in Sanford Stadium. Then you do have Penn State, Indiana, which would be a very fun one to see. Didn't get to see it in the regular season, so would be very much into that. Notre Dame, SMU, I think would be a really fun matchup. SMU can really get after you, can really stretch a defense out, and that would kind of be Notre Dame's Achilles heel, being able to match them athlete for athlete on the outside and create some problems, especially without Benjamin Morrison. That would be a very interesting game. And let's talk about the Ohio State of it all here for a second, because as of right now, if Ohio State and Oregon win this weekend, I feel pretty confident saying they're playing for the 1 and the 5 seed. Whoever loses will get the 5, whoever wins will get the 1 seed. I think all of us kind of feel that way at this very moment. The question is, Ohio State as a 5 seed will play Arizona State, who I was just seeing would be a 20.5 point favorite over Arizona State, and then they would play Boise State. They'd probably be about a 21 point favorite over Boise State right about now. Oregon, however, would have to play the winner of Georgia-Tennessee. So they would have to, hypothetically, would have to play a Georgia team that seems to be hitting their stride at the right time, or a Tennessee team that isn't necessarily playing all that clean of football, but absolutely is a team that on one given Saturday could beat you up and get a win. So it feels like Oregon, as the number 1 seed, has a tougher path to the semifinal than Ohio State has, even playing the one game. And I know that sounds a little bit crazy, but we have to fix this one way or the other. We can't give all the auto buys to the top 4 conference champions. I'm fine with giving them auto bids. I don't love the idea. Frankly, if it was up to me, it would be 16 teams, no auto bids, and we would just play out the 16 best teams in the country. That's obviously not the world that we live in. So if you want to give them auto bids, I think that's more than fine. Giving them auto buys makes this scenario more real, makes the scenario where Ohio State can play Arizona State, and let's just say likely. I don't want to, bury Arizona State or Boise State by any means, but likely get a win there, likely get a win over Boise State, and probably show up a little bit more well-rested, a little bit healthier than that Oregon team after playing a Tennessee or after playing a Georgia. That is a problem that we just have to fix. One way or the other, it has to be the top 4 teams get those buys, because then if you're the 5 seed, you would maybe get an easier first-round matchup, but then you would play a really tough second round. That's the way that this should work out. The idea that anyone would even think about possibly, I don't want to say throwing, but losing their championship on Saturday. Let's say Oregon loses the Big Ten championship. They wouldn't be that upset. They wouldn't be really despondent or anything. They would say, okay, we're in a really good position to go on a run still, to still meet this same team in the semifinals and possibly win a national title. And then that's the other problem with this that I do have. Oregon is the number 1 team in the country. Ohio State is the number 2 team in the country. There is no world where they should be set up to meet before the national title. And I understand if they don't meet at the national title, that's more than fine. But the 2 best teams in the country should be on different sides of the bracket so we can see them hypothetically start to make their way towards that big time matchup at the end of the day. So there are a number of problems with this format. I think we all understand that at this point. I did not necessarily love it when they introduced it. I definitely don't love it now, but at the end of the day, this is what we have right now. I have to imagine that it will be changing this offseason, and we'll see what happens in the next couple of years. But as of right now, Ohio State, you're sitting really pretty. You're in a really good spot one way or the other, whether you get the 1 seed and have the bye, whether you get the 5 seed and play 2 games that you very well should win, you're in a really good spot. I think the one question here is what happens with the SEC title loser. I tend to believe that if Georgia were to lose the SEC championship, let's say they win this weekend and then lose to Texas, I think they would be the 8 seed. If Texas were to win this weekend and then lose to Georgia, maybe they'd slot a little bit higher because of that record, because they don't have the 3 losses at that point. Maybe they would slot above Penn State or above Notre Dame. That'll be an interesting thing to watch. Maybe they would even fall all the way to having to travel for a game. I'd be a little bit surprised with that, but as of right now, I think there's still a lot of doors that are very much open. And Penn State, Miami, Notre Dame, they might be a little bit more safe than we're realizing. I still think losses would put them in a very precarious situation, but maybe they're a little bit safer than we were thinking going into this one. And then Bama's lurking. That's what they do. They're still going to be in the mix, no doubt about it. And it'll be really interesting to see how this all unfolds. It's roughly what I expected from this ranking, but I think it showed just about everyone that was on the fence about it that this format is not the way that we want to go forward. It's a very, very fun thing, and I'm sure it'll be really fun to watch unfold, but the idea that a 5 seed would have a better run to the semifinal or the final than the 1 seed would is just not something that can happen. So these fixes are very, very attainable. We'll figure out in the offseason if they're capable of doing it, but going to be interesting to watch all of that unfold. A lot of unknowns that will likely be answered next week when we get all of this understood. We know who's in the conference championship, all of that type of stuff. So we'll obviously break that down next week when all of that stuff comes out, but let's take our first break here. And when we come back, we got some big game breakdowns we have to get to. Texas at Texas A&M, South Carolina at Clemson, two huge games that have some different implications after them, but we'll break them down right after this, so stick with us.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows where 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about those CFP rankings, roughly what I expected, nothing overly crazy in those rankings. I will say it definitely drove home the idea that this is probably not the right format. The idea that a 5 seed would be set up in a very good position and the 1 seed would possibly be playing Georgia in the second round, not necessarily the way I want this to go about. So I assume that we're going to change that after the year and we'll see a very different playoff in the next couple of years. But as of right now, it'll be a very fun time, a couple of very fun matchups. I think that matchup between, I'm blanking here, between Notre Dame and SMU. That's the one that I was very excited about. We'll see if that one actually comes to fruition, but at the end of the day, will be interesting to see what happens there. The format will be changing. I can almost promise you that. But we got some games to get into, and we have a lot of games to get into over the next couple of segments, so let's go ahead and jump into this one. This is special, no doubt about that. 13 years in the making, an SEC title spot on the line. A&M trying to stay alive in the CFP race at Kyle Field at night. This one is going to be just about as good of an atmosphere as you have ever seen. Now, I kind of grew up, I was born in 2001. Apologies if that made anyone feel old. If it made me look old, I feel really, really bad. But at the end of the day, I was born in 2001. The last time this was played was in 2011. So I knew this game was being played. I definitely watched it. I enjoyed it. Didn't really appreciate what it was. This is going to be the first time in my life where I really get to sit down, watch the Lone Star Showdown, and really appreciate it for all that it is. And I cannot wait. It's a game that I've been looking forward to for the entire season. It is officially here and it has all of the stakes you could possibly want on the line for it. So A&M obviously coming off that tough loss to Auburn and quadruple overtime, they're going to need a much better pass defense in this one if they're going to want to beat these Texas wide receivers because they're a load to deal with, no doubt about that. Texas got the win over Kentucky, but the injury to Quinn Ewers definitely casts a little bit of a shadow around their season, around this game in particular. We'll see how mobile he is. He's not necessarily the most mobile guy to begin with. Him being a little bit hampered now, that D-line for Texas A&M definitely licking their chops just a little bit, seeing if they can get after him in. That's actually the matchup of the weekend. Texas O-line against Texas A&M D-line. I think across all the games across the weekend, probably the most fun matchup to watch. You got Nick Scourton, you got a lot of really Shamar Stewart, a lot of really talented guys on that A&M defensive line, and then one of the most experienced offensive lines in the country on the other side. A lot of really incredible guys, two probably first-round talents in Cam Williams and Kelvin Banks on both tackle positions. It's going to be a lot of fun, especially with the hobbled Ewers. That O-line for Texas is going to have to hold up against just a ferocious group up front for Texas A&M. And for A&M, you cannot get into a hole early. You went down 21-0 to Auburn early, and you had to claw your way back in, and you were able to do it because Auburn made a couple of mistakes, and because that Auburn defense is a little bit attackable. Texas defense is not nearly as attackable. You are not coming back from 21 down against this Texas defense because passing into this Texas back end is pretty much a nightmare. They are really, really good on that back end, and they will absolutely make you pay for just about everything that you try to do. So you're in a position where you got to score first. You got to get this crowd involved. You got to make sure that that 12th man is a real factor in this game. If you fall back, then this Texas offense is going to be able to kind of just run you to death. This Texas defense is going to be really hard to get over 24 points on. So if A&M is going to win this one, you're going to want to drag it down into the mud. There's no doubt about that. If Texas gets over 30 points in this game, A&M's only done that one time this year. So it gives you an idea of if Texas can get to that 30-31 mark, might just be a little bit too much for A&M. But this is a game that I just cannot wait for. This is a game that really everyone should be incredibly excited about. I think that atmosphere will be better than any atmosphere we've seen all year. I think these two fan bases are going to get after each other in a way that you have not seen in quite some time, and it's everything on the table. You know, A&M almost kind of fumbled that a little bit last week, but we still have a spot in the SEC title on the table. We still have just about everything you could possibly want, and you have a lot of hate to go along with it. Cannot wait for this one to get underway, and definitely the game that I was probably most excited for the entire season, definitely for this week. Cannot wait for this game to get underway. But let's talk about players to watch, and I'll start with Ryan Wingo. I thought a very interesting thing about the A&M back end when they were playing Auburn last week is it's not necessarily, they did struggle with the speed of those Auburn receivers, and Texas has that in droves, obviously, but I think they struggled with the physicality as well. Keandre Lambert-Smith went up and got some passes. Cam Coleman was a ton to deal with. Ryan Wingo's that guy for Texas. He's a very physical 6'3", 205 type guy. He can go up and get one, and if these corners for A&M are going to be able to get, kind of mossed a little bit by Keandre Lambert-Smith, it's something that Ryan Wingo can absolutely do. So maybe that big body is a big factor for Texas in this game. And then you do have Anthony Hill, one of the best linebackers in the country. The fact that he's not a Butkus Award finalist is absolutely ridiculous. But at the end of the day, he's still playing in this game. He still wants to win a national title, as he said earlier this week, and he's going to have his hands full with Marcel Reed. That zone read is something that they absolutely love to do. Read option, whatever they can do to get Marcel Reed's legs involved, they will do it. Anthony Hill has kind of been the eraser of a lot of those quarterbacks for Texas throughout the season, whether it was Taylon Green or Martin Van Buren or a couple other guys that they have played throughout the year. They have not been very effective running the ball, and that guy's a huge reason. So he's going to be chasing that around number 10 a lot on Saturday, and he's been very effective at it throughout this season. Noah Thomas is a problem on the outside. He is a matchup nightmare for every single corner in the entire country because he's 6'6". He's an absolute monster. He can go up and get those 50-50 balls in. When I look at the A&M pass game, I think it is very, very solid. I think it's one that can absolutely get you to the SEC championship and give you a shot to win it. The only way you're going to do that is if you have the playmakers making plays on the outside. So Noah Thomas going up and getting the 50-50 ball. Jabri Barber making a play after he makes the catch. Jade Walker making that third down catch. All of these guys are so important. Noah Thomas is the one that's just a nightmare for just about every corner in the entire country. Even with Texas having two of the best corners in the country in Jade Barron and Manny Muhammad, this is going to be a load to deal with. And then Bryce Anderson. He is the safety. He is the leader of this A&M defense in a lot of ways. Him and Torian York kind of call the shots in a lot of ways for that defense, and he's going to have his hands full. It is going to be a lot of work for him on Saturday. He's great at blitzing the passer, so I would assume that he's going to be used in that capacity a little bit. Probably will guard Gunnar Helm a little bit, which is a huge piece to that Texas offense at tight end, so he's going to have his hands full. He's going to have a lot of things to deal with, and he's going to have a lot of really good players running around him that he's going to have to direct traffic for. But keys to the game are going to be huge in this one, and a lot of them are a little bit intangible. Some of them are very, very real, but the 12th man is going to be a factor in this game. This is a unique atmosphere for every single one of the Texas players that is on this team. They've never played in an atmosphere quite like this one. They probably will never play in one like this one ever again. It is going to be very, very special. And the composure of this team has been very good in big moments. You know, Alabama last year, a number of Michigan this year, although not the biggest team on the other side, definitely still a moment where you had to keep your composure. This is going to be a different level. And Quinn Ewers is going to have to lead the way that he has pretty much throughout the entire year and have to keep these guys on schedule, on task, and not kind of getting lost in the atmosphere of it all. Then you got to score first. Whoever scores first in this one definitely is in a really good position for A&M. If you go down 21-0, we talked about it earlier, you are not getting back into this game like you did against Auburn. I can almost promise you that. For Texas, you score first, this crowd could get quiet in a hurry, and that's what you need to do. If you can neutralize this crowd, neutralize the 12th man, you're in a very, very good position. So whoever gets points on the board first, that's where the crowd's going to go, and that's going to have a huge bearing on what this game is. And then the Texas O-line against the A&M D-line. This will probably decide the game, one way or the other. The Texas O-line has been really good in the last couple of weeks. They've been running the ball very effectively. This A&M D-line's absolutely mean, though, and they're going to try to get after Quinn Ewers, especially with him hurting. The Texas O-line's only given up 6 sacks this year. A&M's had 23 sacks this year. So it's kind of good on good. It's going to be incredible to watch that unfold and could very well decide the outcome of this game one way or the other. I think this one's going to be special. There's no doubt about that. This one I cannot wait for. One of the games that I've been looking forward to more than just about anyone else on the schedule. I think Texas gets it done. I think it's going to be gross. I think it's going to be ugly. I think it's going to be weird. But to me, it kind of strikes me as that sort of that Alabama game for Texas last year, where it's not all that pretty. It's a little bit all over the place, but Texas makes those 1 or 2 plays downfield that totally change this game. I think Texas gets the win. I think it's a very fun game. I think it's very back and forth, but I think Texas gets the win and heads to the SEC championship and tries to get that rematch with Georgia. And then we got this one, the Palmetto Bowl that's going on in Clemson, South Carolina this upcoming Saturday. Cannot wait for this one to get underway. And South Carolina has become one of the best stories in the sport, and Clemson still very much has life for the CFP. So it's going to be huge, this game, no doubt about it. The question is, what is the impact of this game? You know, does it put Clemson in the CFP? Does it put South Carolina in the CFP? Does it put Clemson into the ACC championship? A lot of different things that could happen from this game. Frankly, Clemson could lose this game and still win the ACC and get to the CFP. So we'll see what happens there. But at the end of the day, the big question for me is, can this Clemson D-line and really just front seven in general, can they hold up against Lenora Sellers? Because he's become one of the best quarterbacks in the country. In the back half of the season, he's been absolutely incredible. And the front seven for Clemson is downright special. There's no doubt about that. But you have a lot of guys that you're going to have to account for. Him, Rocket Sanders, a lot of the guys that they play around with in the run game. It's going to be a load. They're going to have their hands full, no doubt about that. And I think when you look at this South Carolina team, they do such a good job. Dowell Loggins, the offensive coordinator, does such a good job at keeping these defensive linemen and linebackers kind of just off kilter that they find a lot of openings downfield. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. I think the D-line for Clemson, if they can take over this game, it's going to be a very long day for South Carolina. And really, the same applies to the South Carolina D-line. They can totally take over games because they have in the past. And this Clemson O-line has been very good, only allowed 8 sacks this year, but Dylan Stewart and Kyle Kennard have combined for 18. They are absolutely ridiculous. They're an incredible, incredible duo, and this group overall for South Carolina can get after the passer as well as just about anyone in the country. So it's going to be fascinating to watch the trenches battle. And then on the outside, I think you have a number of playmakers on both sides of the ball that are going to give some trouble. Clemson has a lot of really young, aggressive players, Bryant Westcoat, TJ Moore, Antonio Williams, a little bit more of the elder statesman around there. It's going to be fascinating to watch them against guys like Nick Emanwari and guys like Kilgore and all of these really talented back-end players for South Carolina. And then on the flip side, you have Josh Simon, you have DeLavon Campbell, you have a lot of talented guys for South Carolina, and Avian Terrell is going to have to hold up really well against some of these very talented wide receivers because it is going to be a really, really tough game. No doubt about that. I think there's going to be a battle. I think both teams like to keep it on the ground a little bit, likely one of those games that probably just comes down to 1 or 2 plays, and it will be a huge feather in the cap for an at-large bid for the CFP. Maybe Clemson still has that auto bid in reach. They definitely do, but we'll see what happens there, and I definitely think whoever wins this one is probably South Carolina might be a little bit different. If Clemson wins this one, they're definitely first in line to get to the CFP. I think South Carolina could, if they win this one, if they win it in convincing fashion, I think they very well could be that first team in for the CFP if someone were to stumble. But players to watch. DeLavon Campbell has become a huge player for this team. He was incredible against Missouri, has been incredible really in the back half of this season, and the biggest thing he does is he gets downfield. He makes a ton of explosive plays, and I think when you talk about a game that is going to be a little bit ground and pound, a little bit grind you down, I think those big plays are going to make a difference. So DeLavon Campbell is going to be one of those guys that just has to stretch the field for South Carolina to win this one. And then you do have TJ Sanders. When I talk about this Clemson team, there are so many things that they do well offensively. The best thing they do is establish the run game and then play action. if you can't establish the run, it's going to be a very long day. And TJ Sanders and really all the defensive tackles for South Carolina are going to have their hands full with this guy right here. Phil Maffa, I think, is a huge player for Clemson in this game. He's one of those guys that when you have someone like Cade Klubnik, that is a very good quarterback, but does like to be on schedule, does like to have those one read, get the ball out type of plays, you need a run game to do that. You need to be able to keep the linebackers at bay because they love to hit those seam shots to tight ends and things of that nature. Phil Maffa is going to be the guy that really sets all of that up. It's going to be a load to deal with, but definitely a guy that can absolutely change this game. And then Sammy Brown has become a huge player for Clemson over the last couple of weeks with Wade Woodaz kind of suffering with an injury. A very talented freshman out of Parkview High School, only about 20 minutes from me here in Atlanta, but a really talented player, one of those guys that when you look at Lenora Sellers, when you look at Rocket Sanders, they're really hard to get down. And those linebackers for Clemson are going to have their hands full, and he's going to have to pick up a huge amount of slack with Wade Woodaz probably sitting out this game. But keys to the game, the South Carolina pass rush. As it is for just about every single game this season, it is going to be a huge factor in this one. South Carolina has 39 sacks on the year. Kyle Kennard and Dylan Stewart had 18 together. It's a ridiculous unit in every sense of the word. They're going to get after you, and Cade Klubnik's one of those guys that if you keep him clean, he's fantastic. If you get after him a little bit, that can get to him quite a bit. So it's going to be interesting to watch that one. Definitely a battle that could outright decide this one. Corralling Lenora Sellers is going to be a chore for Clemson in this game. He's one of the more electric players in the country. The Clemson front seven has plenty of guys that can make those plays. But a lot of guys, or a lot of teams that South Carolina has played, has had guys that can make those plays, and they just haven't been able to. So we'll see if Lenora Sellers can keep that thing going. And then explosives. When we talk about this game, I said it's going to be ground and pound, a little bit more run game. That means those explosive plays are going to be huge. Those one or two big-time plays, if they can hit TJ Moore, Clemson, or if South Carolina can hit DeLayvon Campbell down the field or Nick Harbor, it's going to be a huge difference in this game. And the way I see it, South Carolina is just a boulder rolling downhill. I don't necessarily think they're going to have Clemson's defense is going to have the counter that they're going to need for this game. I think the run game is going to get to Clemson just a little bit in this one, and I think South Carolina gets that final win of the season, and we'll see how that affects the CFP race. I have to assume they're probably still on the outside looking in, but maybe they'll give them a little bit of a bump over Alabama, over Ole Miss if they were to win this game, especially if they were able to win it in convincing fashion. But I do have Texas winning. I do have South Carolina winning. It'll be interesting to see how those games play out, and definitely a lot on the table in those two games. But let's take our second break here, and when we come back, we got to talk about a couple other huge games. We got Notre Dame, USC, Miami, Syracuse, Kansas State, Iowa State, a couple of games that can definitely make or break some CFP hope, so we'll break it down right after this.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about those big time games happening in College Station as well as Clemson, South Carolina, Texas A&M, South Carolina, Clemson, two huge games. I have Texas and South Carolina winning those two, and we'll see how the effect of that for South Carolina for the CFP is, but definitely going to be a really, really fun one in those two places. But let's get to some upset alerts. A couple of games that are going to be really interesting, and the last one not quite as much of an upset alert as it's just a really big game in the Big 12, but definitely want to break these down for you guys, and we'll start with that Notre Dame USC game. Going to be a huge one over there in LA, and it's the last game that stands between Notre Dame and a home CFP game. Going to be a huge one, and and they're still kind of digging themselves out of the NIU hole, and I think it puts them in a position where if they were to lose this game, I don't think they would be in. I think they'd be left out for a 3-loss Alabama or for a 3-loss Ole Miss or for a 2-loss Clemson. I think they would be out of the field. So they definitely do have to execute at a very high level. USC obviously trying to ruin the season of their rival. For Notre Dame, the defense is a nightmare to deal with, no doubt about that. The thing is, one area where maybe you can get after him just a little bit is Jaden Maiava is very good at creating plays on his own. He's very good at kind of going off schedule, making the plays that not a lot of other people can make. So maybe that's just it. Maybe it's just him running around, making those crazy plays on third down like Caleb Williams has been able to do against a number of teams in that USC jersey. Not so much Notre Dame, to be totally fair, but it's going to be interesting to watch that unfold, and definitely a player that he's a playmaker, and that playmaking could be an issue for a defense that has been just so good the entirety of the year. The other question is, the Notre Dame run game, will that be too much for USC? USC is 38th in the country at stopping the run. Notre Dame does have the 11th best rushing attack, so it'll be interesting to see who wins out in that category. You slow down that Notre Dame running attack, I think this game could get really interesting in a hurry. If USC can slow them down when running the ball, I think those USC playmakers become a huge part of the game, and maybe just a couple of big-time plays will totally change this one. But some keys to the game. USC's toughness just in general. It's been tested every single week in the Big Ten throughout this year. They've met some tests. They have failed some others. So we'll see what happens in this one. This is going to be a very tall order, no doubt about that. But the interior defensive linemen, the O-linemen, the outside players at corner and at wide receiver, they're going to have their hands full. They're going to get roughed up a good bit in this game, and USC is just going to have the mental and physical toughness to get through this game and battle to a possible win. And then Notre Dame's pressure. They are very close to that CFP. They are very close to hosting their game. They're very close to being in a very good position as they head into that tournament. This is going to be a very tough one to get through. There's no doubt about this. This 4 quarters is going to feel like 8. It's going to be a very long game for Notre Dame, and they're going to have to find a way through it, have to find a way to get a win, and then they're on their way to the CFP, and they get to sit around while everyone else plays conference championships next week. And then Jaden Maiava creating after off schedule. It's going to be fascinating in this game. You know, this D-line, it's going to get after you. The USC offensive line is not necessarily as elite as you would like it to be with how good this defensive and front seven really is for Notre Dame. So maybe it is just Jaden Maiava running around, making a couple of plays here and there, making a play downfield, and the game totally changes. It's going to be huge, and if he's not creating on the outside, then it might be a long day for this USC offense, and I tend to think he's going to have a hard time doing that. Notre Dame's defense, I think, is just going to be too much here. I don't think USC is going to be able to run the ball very effectively, and then Xavier Watts is going to be waiting on the back end to make a big-time play. I think Notre Dame gets the win, sets themselves up for a host position in the CFP, and we'll see what happens from there. Obviously, a lot of people still think they're not quite for real. We'll find out in pretty short order. Maybe they'll lose this weekend and totally fall out of the field. Then you do have Miami-Syracuse, a really interesting game. Miami has their final test before they get into the CFP. I believe even if they lose in the ACC championship, they're probably in pretty good position. We saw where SMU was today, probably where they will be if they would lose in the ACC championship. If they lose in this game, I think it puts them in a weird position where maybe they get that at-large bid if Clemson goes on to win the ACC or something like that. Maybe they get left out for an Alabama or for an Ole Miss. So I wouldn't necessarily tempt fate there. I would try to win this game if I was Miami, get to the ACC championship, and then hopefully get that bye in that first round. But Syracuse likely has enough to go punch for punch with Miami. They have a very, very potent offense. They really get after you. The Miami secondary, relatively good in pass yards per game, only 35th in the country, but they absolutely can get beat deep. So Zede Haynes, Aronde Gadsden, they're going to be huge in this game, and that Syracuse offense has been a little bit hit or miss at times. Wasn't necessarily fantastic against UConn last week, has been just absolutely lights out. In that Georgia Tech game they played earlier this year, they were absolutely incredible. So maybe they still have one of those in their belt. Maybe they can pull out a big-time performance from that pass game from Kyle McCord and get a big-time win here. But more than anything else, Miami's season is on the line, and I think Miami in general this entire season, when they have gone on the road against another passing attack or against another offense in general that can meet you halfway, they've struggled, no doubt about it. You know, that Virginia Tech game, they were able to escape. That Cal game, they were able to escape. There are a lot of very, very close calls. Syracuse is a team that can run the ball with LaQuint Allen, but also can make those plays over the middle of the field. and they have a relatively good back end. So you're going to have to be very careful if you're Miami in this game, because there's a world where they match up a whole lot better than you have for Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech didn't match up quite as well against Miami as Syracuse does, so maybe that's the opening that Syracuse needs in this game. But some keys to the game: Miami's back end is going to be huge. One way or the other, Kyle McCord is going to attack you. And I think when you look at this Miami team, they've been good against the pass as the season has gone on, but they have given up 300 yards to different teams like Louisville and different teams that absolutely are going to pass the ball a little bit more aggressively. Syracuse finds themselves in that group. So it's going to be interesting to watch how much LaQuint Allen's involved, how much they attack that back end, how well the back end plays. Meach Powell and all those guys are going to be huge in this game. And then who can start fast? This is going to be a huge game, and I think Miami, they've fallen into holes over and over again this year. Even last week, they fell into a hole against Wake Forest. So you want to avoid that if you can, because a Syracuse offense this explosive and this dangerous can absolutely turn a 7-point lead into 21 in a hurry. And then you're in a position where you got to come back from 21 down again in the fourth quarter. Probably not going to be as readily able to do that with LaQuint Allen on the other side that can definitely run some clock off definitely run some clock and kind of bury this win for Syracuse. So going to be interesting to watch that one. Whoever starts faster in this game, definitely in a position to win it, because I think Miami's at that point where maybe if they start slow again, that doubt starts to creep in like it did in the Georgia Tech game. So going to be interesting to watch that. Guys like Fadil Diggs definitely want Syracuse to start fast, because then they can kind of pin their ears back and get after Cam Ward. And this is Cam Ward's moment. There's no doubt about that. He's played a Heisman-level season at quarterback. I don't think he should win the Heisman, but at the end of the day, he can put his final stamp on his trip to NYC in this one and send his team to Charlotte. This is why they brought him to Miami. This is why he was one of the most coveted quarterbacks in the transfer portal, and that's why he's going to be the guy that they want to lead him the rest of the way. He's got to win on Saturday to do it. So going to be a huge one, and I think they go back and forth in this game. I think it's going to be an absolute fight. I think Miami has enough in the tank. I think it's going to be a really, really fun game, and I think there's going to be a second there where we're thinking about, is Miami left out? Is Clemson going to get in as a 3-loss team? There's going to be a lot of things that are going to get thrown out around this time on Saturday. But I think Miami ends up pulling it out, as they have pretty much this entire year, and they send themselves to the ACC Championship. And then finally, we do have Kansas State, Iowa State, going to be a huge game over there in Ames, Iowa. And the Big 12 has very interesting implications around this game. Iowa State is likely in the Big 12 championship if they win. Now, there is a scenario where if BYU were to lose this weekend and then everyone else at the top 4 were to win, I think it'd be Colorado that would go over Iowa State. So something to watch there. Definitely something that could totally shake this thing up. But as of right now, it would be Iowa State in the Big 12 championship after this one. Kansas State, their pass defense has been very, very bad. They've given up almost 250 yards per game through the air, and the duo coming in of Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel are going to be a load for them to deal with. They're going to have to find a way to keep them in front of them, make sure they get them on the ground, because they can absolutely make you hurt, and they can go for 200 yards each. They're absolutely ridiculous athletes, and both of them are nearing 1,000 yards on the season. So really remarkable players, and if Kansas State's pass defense cannot play a little bit better, then it's going to be a long day for them. Now, the good news for them is the Iowa State run defense, not all that great either. So they're going to have to battle tooth and nail for that one. Maybe Kansas State can run the clock just a little bit and just take over this game on the ground, run some clock, control the time of possession, and then Iowa State just won't have the time to come back in this game. But some keys to the game: the Iowa State wide receivers against those Kansas State DBs. I mean, Jaden Higgins over 1,000 yards this year. Jalen Noel just very close to it, probably will pass it in this game. And Keenan Garbers and Jacob Parrish, they've played good football. They have not played great football, and they're going to have to play great football on Saturday, because these two guys can make you pay in an absolute second. They are very, very good, probably one of the best duos in the Big 12, right after that Colorado duo, or you can pick any number of duos from that group, but those two are really, really dangerous, and I think they're going to be a load to deal with for this Kansas State back end. The KSU run game is going to be huge in this one. Iowa State sits about 100th in run defense in the country. DJ Giddens and Avery Johnson are licking their chops at that. There's no doubt about that. They're going to try to get after you, and we'll see if DJ Giddens can have one of those games where he essentially just takes over, a Cam Scattaboo type game where he is the entire offense for Kansas State, and they end up getting the win. And then seizing the opening, seizing the chance, because both these teams have an opening for the Big 12 title. Kansas State obviously needs a little bit more to happen, needs a little bit more of a chaotic weekend, but Iowa State's in a position where you win this one, you win against Arizona State, you're in the CFP. As crazy as that sounds with how weird this season has been, you would find your way back into the CFP. And Kansas State, I think you're probably in a tough spot to find your way into the CFP, if I'm being totally honest, but maybe if you win the Big Ten, you could jump Tulane and get into that mix. But I think it's going to be a really fun game, back and forth. I think this Kansas State run game is going to own the day. I think DJ Giddens is going to be a problem in this game. I think Avery Johnson's going to make at least enough plays. It won't be all that pretty, but I think he'll make just enough plays, and I think Kansas State gets that one done. I think Miami's going to barely win. I think Notre Dame will get out with a win, but it's going to be really interesting to watch these unfold. Definitely going to be games that will totally define and totally change the CFP race, and that Notre Dame game is one that Alabama's watching very closely, that Clemson's watching very closely, that a lot of people right on the outside are going to be watching very closely. But going to be awesome to watch those games unfold. Let's take our third break here, and when we come back, we got to talk about the rivalries of the weekend. We got clean old-fashioned hate going on in Athens, Georgia, the Iron Bowl, the game. I want to break them all down right after this, so stick with us.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about three games that will have a huge amount of impact on the CFP race. We have Notre Dame USC, you got Miami Syracuse, you got Kansas State Iowa State. Three games that will be absolutely huge and definitely could give some teams a little bit of hope that they do not think that they have right now. But let's get to some rivalries. Let's talk about some big time rivalries that are going on this upcoming weekend, and we'll start with one of my personal favorites, clean old-fashioned hate that is going on in Athens, Georgia this weekend. One of my personal favorites because I did grow up in the Atlanta area, went to a lot of these games, and absolutely loved this rivalry. It was so much fun to watch Paul Johnson's triple option offense go against the just beast that Mark Richt had back in the day. But going to be a really awesome game this Saturday, no doubt about that. And Georgia Tech is one of those teams that if they can do nothing else, they can run the football. And Georgia has been a team that hasn't necessarily struggled with the run the entire year, but at different moments, that D-line has gotten, I don't want to say pushed around, but handled a little bit, and other teams have been able to run the ball. If Georgia Tech can get Jamal Haynes going and that run game going in this game, it can get a little bit interesting. They definitely need that in this game because you want to keep the ball out of that Georgia offense. There's no offense's hands, no doubt about that, and Georgia Tech's looking to just blow up Georgia's season. If they were to win this game, I think Georgia would be on a very, very interesting path with the SEC championship the next weekend. Would be fascinating to watch all that unfold. And then for Georgia, this Georgia Tech back end should be able to be attacked. No doubt about that. You should be able to continue building Carson Beck's confidence, get yourself a spot in the CFP, and get yourself a very good spot in Atlanta at the end of this one. But some keys to the game. The Georgia Tech quarterback situation is something you're going to want to follow. Aaron Philo and Haynes King have kind of been splitting snaps over the last little bit. Haynes King has not necessarily been 100% by any means. He's been doing a lot of different run plays, zone reads, and things of that nature. I don't think he's going to play a huge role in this game. I think it's a lot of window dressing for Georgia Tech, and then Aaron Philo will likely be the quarterback in this one, and it's going to be a lot for him to deal with. Now, he is from the Athens area, so it'll be a really cool moment for him to play in Sanford Stadium, I assume in front of a lot of friends and family, but at the end of the day, going to be a very interesting atmosphere for the freshman to deal with. And then the Georgia Tech O-line against the UGA D-line. This Georgia Tech O-line, one of the best in the country when it comes to run blocking. They are a very good unit and are very unsung because they're not necessarily that big-time team, but this unit up front is really, really good under Brent Key, who used to be an offensive lineman. So he built out that unit very, very effectively, and it's going to be a huge group. If they can get that run game going and kind of cut down the time of possession for Georgia, this thing is going to be really interesting like it was last year. And then who can avoid mistakes? Carson Beck is not quite out of the woods when it comes to his interception turnover bug that he's had the last couple of weeks. For Georgia Tech, they need to avoid mistakes. If they make mistakes, if they give the ball to Georgia a couple of times in this game, it's going to be a nightmare for them. So who can win those 50-50 battles? Who can flip the game with that one interception, with that one fumble? Who cannot flip the game with that one fumble, with that one interception? And make sure that their team is just playing really clean football throughout the day. So I think it's going to be a really fun game. I think they get after each other for about a half, and then Georgia probably pulls away at the end of the day. I think this Georgia Tech back end's a little bit too porous for my taste, and I think Carson Beck is playing really elite football, so I'm going to pick Georgia to win this one. I think that first half is going to have a lot of people tweeting that Georgia's not so for real and Georgia doesn't belong and all that type of stuff, and then they'll probably pull away in the second half. And then we do have the Iron Bowl, the one that ended on one of the craziest plays that I've ever seen, one of the worst defensive plays that I've ever seen in my life, with the 4th and 31 to Isaiah Bond, who is actually going to be playing in College Station this upcoming weekend for Texas. But Alabama's in a position that they're not usually in. They do not hold all the power when it comes to their future in the CFP. They got to win this game, and then they got to find a way to get another loss. They could win this game and very well be on the outside looking in. That being said, 8-4 would create a lot of talk around Tuscaloosa, around Kalen DeBoer, and especially losing this game, it would be a very interesting reception. I can almost promise you that. Auburn is coming off the win of the year over A&M this past weekend. Now they go on the road for a rivalry matchup. The question to me is the energy and focus still at that level? Are they riding that high, sort of? Or have they lost a little bit of that as all of the energy put towards that A&M game, and now they're a little bit dragging for this one? It's happened before this season, definitely could happen in this one. And then Jalen Milroe is the guy for this offense. There is no other person that is going to make a lot of these plays. There is no other person that is going to be asked to make a lot of these plays. Jalen Milroe is going to win or lose this game for Alabama one way or the other. Auburn did a really good job of shutting down Marcel Reed's legs, at least making them less of a factor. He definitely made some plays with his legs, but definitely was not the factor that he can be. If they can do the same to Milroe, then he's going to have to do what he did against Oklahoma, which is stand back there and pass, and we saw what happened when he stands back there and passes. So it's going to be interesting to see what the attack is for the Auburn defense, and the first key to the game is that energy difference that I talked about. Does Auburn, are they depleted after that win? Are they energized after that win? For Bama, are they angry after that loss? Are they a little bit demoralized after that loss? I think after the rankings came out yesterday, they're probably feeling a little bit more energized, but definitely a interesting thing going into this game where you usually have an Auburn team that's dragging and you have an Alabama team that has everything to play for. A little bit of a different scenario this time around. Then Milroe against the D-line of Auburn. They're a very good group. They're very long. They're very athletic. They're roughly as good as many other SEC groups around the conference. Milroe's legs are a little bit different, and they're what makes this Alabama offense a little bit special. And we'll see if Auburn can do what they did to Marcel Reed. Obviously, Milroe is probably a little bit better of an athlete than Marcel Reed is, but definitely going to be one of those things that you're just going to have to do. One way or the other, you have to slow this guy down. If you don't slow him down, then he is going to make you pay. He is going to totally take over this game, and Alabama's going to run away with this one, win by about 17, and possibly find themselves in the playoff as an at-large bid. So Auburn wants to avoid that at all costs, and if they're going to do that, probably need some explosive through the air. I think that's going to be a huge part of this game. Both teams love to push the ball downfield. Both teams are pretty successful at pushing the ball downfield. Peyton Thorne's gotten much, much better at throwing those deep balls. Jalen Milroe, one of the best in the country at throwing deep balls. So guys like Cam Coleman, guys like Ryan Williams, Keandre Lambert-Smith, Jeremy Bernard, they're going to be huge in this game. And who can make those one or two big-time plays deep over the field might just be the difference in this one. And I think when I look at this one, there's so many different narratives that go into this one. Kalen DeBoer definitely feeling the pressure. I can promise you that. Auburn feeling a little bit less pressure, but definitely want to get to that bowl game at the end of the day. The way I look at this one is Alabama's just not going to be denied. I just cannot believe that Alabama is going to go out here and lose a second straight game, fall fully out of the contention for the CFP before that final weekend. I have to assume that they're going to get a win. I really thought about picking Auburn. I'll be totally honest with you. I really like what this Auburn team is doing, and I think they're a really dangerous group. I just can't pick against Alabama in this spot. They already lost one game that was really embarrassing. I think they come back home. I think they get a big win, and then they'll see if Notre Dame or if someone in front of them can fall and they can possibly sneak into that field. And then we got the game. The one that everyone has loved to watch the last 3 seasons has been the marquee game of the weekend. The last 3 seasons, not so much this year. It is now a game that Michigan just wants to ruin Ohio State's season with, which is what it was for about a decade there, right before those 3 seasons. But at the end of the day, Ohio State doesn't need motivation. It's already there. Ryan Day does not have to do a rah-rah speech. He does not have to get his guys up for this game. He does not have to do much of anything. There's going to be steam rolling out of these guys' ears when they walk out of the tunnel. I promise you that. There are a lot of players on this team that have not beaten Michigan once. Jack Sawyer has not beaten Michigan. JTT has not beaten Michigan. Denzel Burke has not beaten Michigan. They are very mad about that. They're going to come out of this one. They're going to try to throw the first punch. Now, if Michigan were to throw the first punch, if Michigan were to get the first score on the board, would those Ohio State players look around and say, no way this is happening again? And a little bit of them kind of shy away from this game. That is definitely an opening. So Michigan might just want to throw that first punch, see if it knocks down Ohio State. That being said, I do think they're going to come in with a lot of fire in this game. I think some people are going to be flying around. Hopefully we don't get any injuries from it, but there will be guys flying around the field. I can promise you that. But Will Howard is going to be faced with a ton of pressure and different coverages in this game. Wink Martindale does a great job of confusing people with pre-snap stuff. He's just got to play mistake-free. He's got to facilitate the offense, get the ball out to the playmakers, and let them make plays, especially without Will Johnson in this back end. You'll have the opening to make a lot of those plays downfield. Just got to get the ball to your guys and then let them do what they do. Keys to the game, 3 years of buildup. I mean, Ryan Day, all of those players on that sideline, they're going to be mad. They're going to want every bit of energy, every bit of thing that you will give him. If you will give him bulletin board material, they will take it. All those seniors are going to be as mad as can be when they walk out of that tunnel, and they're probably going to take it out on Michigan. They're going to be very, very aggressive in this game. Obviously, have to be very, very careful. Controlled aggression, as they call it, but going to be an incredible game, and definitely one where Ohio State's going to let out quite a bit of frustration over the last 3 years. Then you do have the Michigan defensive tackles against an injured offensive line for Ohio State. This is the best defensive tackle duo in the entire country. Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant can absolutely wreck this game if they were to slow down this rushing attack for Ohio State. Can Will Howard shoulder the load? Can he make all the plays through the air that he needs to make? Or will this kind of get this game bogged down and kind of make this confusing and throw a little bit of a wrench into the work for Ohio State? So that's what they're going to need. Michigan's going to need these two to totally blow up the game. If they're handled, then it's going to be a long day for them. And then can Michigan dominate time and possession? This is what they do. This is what they've always done. This is what they did for the last 3 years, and they did it really, really well. And they're going to have to do it probably even better on Saturday, frankly, because they got to keep the ball out of the hands of Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka and Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, and I could go on and on, frankly. There are ridiculous amounts of playmakers on the other side, and the only real chance you have to stop them consistently is make sure that they're on the sideline consistently. So run the ball very effectively. If you can get that going, then maybe you elongate some of these offensive drives and things get a little bit closer than Ohio State likes them in that fourth quarter. All that being said, there's so much build-up. Michigan definitely has plenty to play for in this game. Ohio State's out for blood. They're going to beat this team into submission. I can almost promise you that. Now, if Michigan goes out there and wins, all respect to Sharon Moore. I will be on here singing his praises on Monday. They are not winning this game. Ohio State is going to go out there. They are going to be very, very aggressive in their approach, and they're going to win this game. And then when they have it in wraps, when they're up 21 points in the fourth quarter, they're going to keep pouring on. I absolutely promise you that. Ryan Day is very angry about this game going the wrong direction the last couple of years, and he's going to come with steam rolling out of his ears, and they're going to really put it on this team, if I had to imagine. I don't think this stops at any point. I don't think they're even thinking about resting some starters for next week. They want to beat the crap out of this team, and I think they will do that. So I'm going to pick Ohio State. I'm going to pick Alabama, but I'm very much on the edge about that one. And I'm going to pick Georgia to get some big-time wins this upcoming weekend. But we got to take our last break here. We are going a little bit long here with all the games we have to get to, but we'll take our last break here, and then we'll do a whip around to just all the other games. We have a million other games to get to, so we'll go a little bit rapid fire here, no doubt about that. But want to break down all the games you guys have to be on the lookout for this weekend right after this, so stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just got to some of the big time rivalries this upcoming weekend. Some clean old fashioned hate in Athens, Georgia. We got the Iron Bowl going on in Tuscaloosa. We got the game over there in Columbus, Ohio, and I think Ohio State's going to really put it on Michigan. I think they're very angry over the last couple of years, and I think they don't stop when they're up by 21 in this one. But let's get to a little bit of a whip around. We got a lot of games to get to because obviously we do not have a show tomorrow or Friday. Want to make sure you guys get an idea of all the games that you should be watching for this upcoming weekend, so let's roll through these real quick. And we'll start with that Memphis-Tulane game. Apologies, should have put Tulane number 17 in the country. But Tulane-Memphis is going to be a huge game and a massive one for Tulane to just kind of send a message to the committee. If they're able to win this one in a blowout, maybe that gap between them and the Big 12 becomes a little bit closer and a little bit closer, and then they might have the opening to knock the Big 12 out of the CFP. But for Memphis, they've been a little bit up and down this year. They've been able to rattle off a couple of wins recently, but in their 2 losses this year, they have given up 56 points to Memphis. They gave up 44 to UTSA. That defense has been a little bit hit or miss throughout the year, and definitely something to watch in this game. I think when you look at the Tulane defense, become one of the best units in the entirety of the group of 5. They really get after you. They did a great job against Navy a couple of weeks ago. They only gave I think they might have shut out Navy a couple of weeks ago. So really remarkable stuff from this Tulane defense. And when you look at this Memphis offense, a little all over the place. The Memphis pass defense is 112th in the country when pass yards per game. I think Tulane wins in a blowout. I think Tulane rolls in this one. I think they put themselves in a really good position going into championship week to possibly knock out the Big 12. And I still think they're the best team in the group of 5. I think they'll prove it on Saturday. And then this other team in the group of 5 that is currently sitting in the CFP is Boise State. They're playing an Oregon State team that is playing pretty good football right now. They beat Washington State last week and definitely got a lot going on the ground. It's going to be interesting to see if they can get this going against Boise State. Obviously, Ashton Jeanty trying to send his final Heisman message. I think that race is pretty much over. I think it's going to be Travis Hunter, but obviously would love to get one more great performance and get that one win away from getting a possible CFP bye in the first round. So a lot riding on this game. I think Oregon State, not so great at stopping the run. They are a very, very porous run defense, and I think that's about all the analysis you need for this one. If Oregon State cannot stop the run against Ashton Jeanty, he's going to take over this game. I think Boise State wins this one, but I think Oregon State can make it a little bit interesting. They played some pretty good football against Washington State, and I think they'll be able to make this one at least close. Boise State has not been good about blowing out teams recently, so I'll say Boise State wins, but I'll keep it within the 19 almost for sure. Oklahoma State, Colorado. Had to go back to the old Big 12 days to get this picture, but absolutely love the old Big 12 days, so I don't mind that by any means. Colorado is still very much alive for the Big 12 title. They need one thing to go their way. They need to get this win right here, and they need BYU to lose to Houston. Those two things happen. You are on your way to Arlington. You are still very much alive for this thing, so got to go get a win against a team that has no Big 12 wins this year. The Oklahoma State Cowboys have become one of the most disappointing teams in the entire country this year. So you should be able to beat them. Now, this Oklahoma State backend is one of the very worst in the country, giving up almost 275 passing yards per game. Colorado's going to get after them. I think they're a little bit angry about how last week finished. I think they want to finish the year or possibly send themselves to the Big 12 championship on a very high note. I'll take the Buffs to win this one, and then we'll see what happens with BYU Houston. Mississippi State, Ole Miss, the Egg Bowl is going on. It lost a little bit of luster this past weekend when Ole Miss went down, but Ole Miss is still alive in a chaos scenario for the CFP during rivalry weekend, which I wouldn't expect, but we'll see what happens in this one. But they just got to handle their business a little bit earlier in the week on Friday when they play this game, and the Ole Miss defense has stifled offense or. The Ole Miss has been stifled by defenses that can take away the big play, but Mississippi State does not necessarily do that all that well. Frankly, that defense doesn't do a lot of things all that well, if I'm being totally honest. I think Ole Miss rolls in this one, and then they just pray for chaos to happen all around them. I think it could happen, but definitely going to need some help. But Ole Miss, I think they're going to let out some frustrations in this one, get a pretty comfortable win, and then just hope that Notre Dame and Clemson and a million other teams will fall out and they could find their way back in as an at-large. Tennessee is a team that is very much in the conversation. They're the number 8 team in the country. Apologies for that, but Tennessee is very much in this conversation. They're one win away from a CFP. maybe they could host a game. I think they're probably pretty set at that 9 position as long as Notre Dame doesn't lose or Penn State doesn't lose, that type of thing. I think they're pretty firmly at that number 9 position. We'll see what happens, but I would say they're probably not going to host a game. Maybe they can, but we'll see what happens in this game. I think for this one, it's really just about the Tennessee defense. They're so stout, they're so disciplined, and against a run defense or run offense for Vanderbilt that's so good at misdirection and taking your eyes different places, I don't think they're going to be quite as susceptible as that, as everyone else was. Kind of like that Texas game, where Texas was able to kind of shut down the run attack for Vanderbilt. I think Tennessee does the same thing. I think they win this one, probably a pretty close one. I think Vanderbilt still has a little bit of fight left in the tank, but I do think Tennessee gets the win. I think they find themselves into the CFP probably as a team traveling somewhere else for a game. Then you got California SMU, and this is one, SMU's kind of in an interesting spot. They're already in the ACC championship, so they don't necessarily have to win this game, but I do think a win here would almost guarantee them a spot in the CFP. An 11-1 SMU going into the ACC championship, even if they were to lose, I do think they would be in the field, probably traveling somewhere for a game like they are right now in the field, but it'll be interesting to see what this one unfolds. And if you saw the Cal game last week, it was a crazy comeback against Stanford, and the interview with Fernando Mendoza after it was absolutely incredible. It was everything that college football is about, but this is going to be a really interesting game. How much energy does California have left after that incredible game that they played against Stanford? I would argue not quite enough. I think this SMU defense continues to roll. I think they win, and I think they lock up a CFP spot on this in this game. Then we got Arizona State, Arizona. Cannot wait for this one to get underway because Arizona has been not good as of recently. They lost 6 out of the last 7. They are officially out of bowl contention. Their defense has allowed 30 points in 5 of the last 6 games. They gave up 300 rushing yards to UCF. It's been very ugly. Let's just be totally honest for Arizona. All that goes out the window for this one. That's why you see an 8.5 line on this one, not a 15.5 line for Arizona State, because this one's going to be a little bit different. They're going to get after each other, no doubt about that. Arizona State is the only team in the Big 12 that controls their own destiny. If they win this one, they are in the Big 12 championship. If they win the Big 12 championship, they are likely in the CFP, maybe getting a bye, depending on what happens with Boise State and Tulane the rest of the way. So a lot of things going on in this one. This Arizona defense is just not very good, and I think Arizona State gets the win. I do think it's going to be a little bit close, have a little bit of that rivalry feel to it, but I think Arizona State wins. They punch their ticket to Arlington, and then just wait to see who's going to join them, whether it's BYU, Colorado, Texas Tech, who knows? There's a million different teams that could possibly get into it, but I think Arizona State will get into it with a win here. Arkansas and Missouri, a very interesting game where not necessarily a ton riding on this game, but Missouri looking to finish their season on a strong note with a 9-3 year. Arkansas still looking for that last big win to finish off the season, let a little bit of that pressure around Sam Pittman subside just a little bit, and also get to a bowl game, which would be very, very nice for Arkansas. I believe they're 6-5. Maybe I'm mistaken there. So we'll see what happens in this game. I think Missouri is one of those teams that they played relatively well throughout the season. You know, they've had different moments where they've gotten beat, and I think the biggest thing in those games where they've gotten beat is the run game has really gotten to them. They've gotten gashed on the ground, and it's been just too much for this offense to come back from. I think Jaquindon Jackson can do just that. I think he has a huge day. I think Taylon Green has a huge day, and I think Arkansas gets the win here. Not necessarily the most impactful game, but definitely one that'll be really interesting, and hopefully we'll have a little bit of that rivalry feel that all the others in the SEC will. Then you got NC State, North Carolina, and this one, not quite that big of a game. On the field, not super big, but the big story is off the field. Mack Brown has been fired at UNC. He will be coaching this game, though. They will let him finish out the season. They're not going to a bowl game. They're 4-7 right now, so they're in a position where this will be the last game of the season, and it could be the last game of the career for Mack Brown. And if it is, a Hall of Fame career, no doubt about that. One of the best teams and runs in the 2005 season with Texas, a really remarkable coach, probably a more incredible person. You hear so many stories about how incredible he was to media, how incredible he was to recruits and their parents. He's a remarkable person. So all the things that he did, incredible things on the football field, he's probably done just about as many incredible things off it. An incredible person that I would love to see go out with a win. So I'm going to say give me the Tar Heels on this one. Hopefully he gets a win to go out, and I would be surprised if he found his way back into the game. I think this is probably going to be the last time we see Mack Brown, so enjoy it while you can. Very special person, very special coach, and hopefully he can get a win to end off his career. Then we got Purdue, Indiana. This is just the game that's standing in the way of a historic season for Indiana, the one that will send them to the CFP and get a lot of things really started over there in Bloomington. Going to be a huge game, and Purdue's going to get rolled. I'll be totally honest with you. This one is not going to be close. Indiana is probably pretty mad about the performance that they put together against Ohio State. Indiana's mad about the Ohio State performance. Purdue is the team that's probably going to get rolled in this game. I think Indiana gets the win, and they're likely traveling for that first round game in the CFP, but they don't care about that. They just want to be in the field and then try to prove some people wrong when they're there. And then finally, one that's going to have an interesting bearing on the Big 12 championship. If Houston were to win, then it could send Colorado in. If BYU were to win, it could send Iowa State into the field. So a lot of different things that could happen from this game. BYU could still get into the Big 12 championship if Colorado were to, or if a couple of teams were to fall like Iowa State. So a lot of things on the table for this game, and a lot of things that could just not be on the table for this game. But it would be very interesting to watch this one unfold. I think BYU is a team that has lived on the margins. It's been turnovers, third down, a lot of situational football that has gotten them to this point. Good news for them is Houston is very good at giving the football away. They are very good at missing a lot of those situational football moments and missing a lot of the things that BYU is just incredible at. So I do think BYU gets the win and maybe gets to Arlington. If that Kansas State pick goes the way that I think it's going to go, they would get to Arlington. With a win here, would be incredible to watch unfold, but definitely going to be a huge game and definitely could keep that magical season for BYU going or could bring it to a screeching halt. So it's going to be an incredible week. I cannot wait for this one. The Texas A&M game is the game I've been looking forward to more than any other game this year. Cannot wait for that one to get underway. A lot of other games that are going to be incredible to watch. Maybe those rivalry games in the Iron Bowl and the game aren't quite as big as they usually are. They're still going to be really fun. I can promise you that. So enjoy it all. A little reminder, we will not have shows tomorrow or Friday. Enjoy your Thanksgiving, enjoy your family, and enjoy some football in that time. But that'll do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all the social pages for all the content and updates you could possibly need. We have great people doing great work across every single sport you could want. So anything in the world of sports you need, come on over to GSMC and we have you totally covered. Thank you once again for listening. Enjoy your Thanksgiving, enjoy all the games, and we will be back here on Monday to break down all of the craziness that I'm sure will ensue. So have a good one, and I'll see you guys on Monday.